Hey everyone, just before we jump into the episode, if you're listening to this and struggling to build pipeline through outbound prospecting, go and grab yourself a free access to my new prospecting course. It's got lessons on cold calling. It has the script that my last team used to go from 6 meetings a month to 60 meetings per month. I break the exact script down and I give you one of my AI tools so that you can build your own version of it. I have a lesson on outbound email, how to actually write that very first outbound email, teaching you the key components, and I give you examples of what good looks like. There's lessons in there on how to use video and voice note prospecting to cut through the noise and grab your buyer's attention. And then there's a whole load of other resources in there and lessons and tools. So if you're struggling to build pipeline, go and grab that now. There'll be a link in the video description. Anyway, let's jump into the episode. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Hit Your Numbers podcast. Today I'm joined by Nick. Hey Nick, how's it going?
Hey James, all good?
Good stuff. Today we're going to be talking about coaching the coaches, something we just don't see pretty much any content really online about. Everyone's selling their $57 playbook on how to book more meetings on LinkedIn, but nobody's really, I talk about that all of the time, right? Not that it gets to me. But nobody really kind of talks about this stuff in detail. So looking forward to really getting into the conversation. Really random question, Nick, and we're recording this if anyone's listening on the start of Black Friday. Have you bought anything interesting so far from Black Friday, or are you yet to get into it?
So I haven't, but I have been checking out, like, expanding my Alexa speakers, because there's a lot of different iterations and models, and I just got to double check to see whether they are compatible with the ones that I bought like 4 or 5 years ago. So I'm kind of stalling a little bit. I think I've got a couple of things in the basket, but no, I haven't pressed the button on that yet.
I got carried away. I don't normally do it, but me and my partner have been thinking about getting a Peloton bike for a while. Like, I'm a member of David Lloyd. It's actually not even that far, but you know what it's like when I got a young boy running a business. Like, just trying to get time sometimes is tough. So when he's down, I can come in here and get a quick ride in and watch some Netflix or whatever. So yeah, ordered that this morning. To be fair, I didn't think the Peloton bike would go on offer, because like Pelotons, I can't, sometimes a bit like Apple, where they usually don't do discounts, but it was wildly discounted this morning. So
nice. We should have spoke earlier, James. So I've got 2 Pelotons in my shed.
Oh, just what you're going to say. They're brand new and I've never used them.
But I haven't converted my garage into a gym, so they're going to be in there in a couple of weeks' time. So yeah,
nice.
You'll make the most of it, sure.
I pulled the trigger on that, and then I've had my eye on one of those Sage coffee machines for ages. I'm a big coffee drinker. I spend far too much money at Starbucks every day, so the missus just said, just get a really decent one, and it'll pay for itself probably in a month. So yeah, I'm looking forward to sipping on a nice flat white while on the Peloton. So we'll see. Anyway, nice. I was curious. Cool. So for the listeners, Nick, maybe just give them a really quick overview. Who are you? What's your background? And then we'll jump into the conversation today.
Yeah, sure. So I really like, and by the way, just thanks for having me on. I've really enjoyed like your guests that you've had on. I think that there's almost like a rawness that you've got with these podcasts, in the reality of what it is to be like in the front line, but also in leadership as well, to your point. And great book, by the way. Bit of a prompt for you. Nobody's got a degree in B2B sales, right? I think that's the thing. And so for me, I sort of fell into it as well. I got kind of 3 phases to my career. I cut my teeth in recruitment, actually. Did that for 4 years. Started as a researcher, which was horrendous. I was on Regent Street with literally kind of a yellow pages, where I was cold calling a lot of tech companies. Actually, it was a sales recruitment business that I was working for. My job was to cold call the switchboard and map the sales org. It was a great learning for me. I had a guy sat in front of me that just chain smoked. It was horrendous. So just kind of like showing how old I am as well. But that was great. I kind of had my fill. Managed to cold call the sales director at Orange, this company that was doing mobile phones at the time, because there was this breakout capability that was being rolled out across the GSM network, which was data. and I saw that there was a lot of enablement opportunity that was taking place. For posterity, I've got this, James, which is my BlackBerry.
Oh, the good old BlackBerry, yeah.
Yeah. So I managed to get a job at Orange Business Services as an AE. I was 27 at the time. I had nearly 8 years there. Did really well. Learned enterprise sales. Got some really great training. On reflection, it was very complex training at the time for what it was that we needed. I think it was a company called LDL that did this. They did this program called Find the Fox, but it was way too complicated. And I had sort of like 3 days as like a 27, 28-year-old. And I just felt absolutely frazzled after it. I'm not sure what I learned. So I feel I've got a combination of what I learned in the training, but also in the field. So we can come back to that and talk a little bit about that. But no, actually, on reflection, it was a really good grounding for me. Did really well as an AE, moved into first-line management just before I left there. So recruitment, telco, AE enterprise sales, a little bit of first-line sales management. And then the last decade and a bit for me have really been SaaS. And so I had a little bit of an itch where I had a year trying to be an entrepreneur, raised a little bit of angel funding for a dating app, believe it or not. And that was in 2008 when the world collapsed financially. And got the scars from that. That didn't go anywhere, burnt that money. But I actually met some entrepreneurs, and this one guy that I met was launching his customer experience platform subsidiary in the UK. So I was first person on the ground, registered the company, did all the operational stuff, built that business over 6 years, got sold. So that was a great experience for me. I actually joined a competitor. They got acquired by a business called LogMeIn, which is really where I've been for the last 8 years. LogMeIn is a portfolio SaaS business. It got rebranded, taken from public to private. And I built out a CX platform business called Bold360. That got sold to Genesis. I basically ran the go-to-market in EMEA. And for the last 4 years, I've been in cyber for LastPass. Yeah. So amazing. That's me. I can dig in as you would like to.
Yeah, you've been around the block. Love it. Got the scars. That's where we learn, though, right? Like when I stepped up in my first leadership role, no one gave me the playbook. I started messing things up, and the problem is you're not burning opportunities. You're messing up like human conversations, right, and relationships. So it's an expensive mistake. So I think today is going to be helpful around like talking about how do we coach our coaches and go through that journey. Yeah. It's interesting as well. Like a lot of people I interview on here that have started out in sales and fallen into sales and become built great careers. A lot of them come from recruitment. Interesting, right? Because it's tough. It's literally KPI micromanaged. Really really sweaty, and it gives you the thick skin, gritty resilience. Super accountable. You own the numbers. You just get on and just get shit done, right? And I think that's what we need in sales. I feel like we've lost our way a little bit to a degree these days. I don't know if you see that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole sort of decision by democracy now is just very, very difficult, right? It's very tough, I think, to get a deal over the line in a hyper-competitive environment. I was looking at some stats recently and did a session with one of my sales leaders and their team, and we walked them through the investment of an average AE for a SaaS company versus the average procurement person, and it was really interesting because we walked them through the career of procurement. And, ultimately that career development that takes place. There's about including certifications, right? So if you think about procurement certification, if you include that with the enablement investment, there's about a 10% increase to that of the average SaaS AE. So if you just kind of think about that, the environment that you're selling into, it's a professional buying environment, right? And this is just one element of it. So yeah, super challenging, super difficult.
Yeah, totally. So let's kind of look back in those kind of leadership years, all the way from kind of that first initial stage in Orange and through to where you are today. You've been doing this for a long time, so I can imagine you've experienced a bunch of challenges coaching the coaches. Like maybe you can just give the listeners some of those challenges, so that if maybe someone's stepping up into like, okay, I've now got a team of managers below me. I don't want to make those mistakes and slow things down. I can not cut corners, but I can mitigate that
Yeah.
risk and overcome it. Anything comes to mind for you?
I've just realized actually when I was at Orange, I was on a PIP after I think it's 8 months. So, and my sales director at the time, he literally wrote on my payslip, "This must improve." And that was the
Nice.
only coaching that I got from
Love
him.
that.
But actually, it gave me the determination to prove him wrong, and I guess it worked as much as he didn't really inspire me. There was a lot of top-down, aggressive, kind of like must do better attitudes that were there. So that taught me a lot. I think you kind of you hire for the skill and the will, and we can talk a little bit about that. But I think that there are two sort of fundamental challenges that I see for coaching coaches. One is that sales activity and distractions and velocity expectations, they're just forever present. And I think that performance inconsistencies and clarity of responsibilities get masked really, really quickly, especially through organizational change. And I think in tech and in SaaS especially, and as I said, I've done kind of seed, series, ABC, public to private, divestitures, spin outs, and the organizational change layered on with the responsibilities of sales management can be a real sort of like just cluster and really hard thing to deal with. So I think first and foremost, it's I think a real duty of care to protect sales leadership, to maintain that rhythm, right? Because I think sales and sales management is really about the rhythm and the discipline of the week. We can talk a little bit more about that as well. So I think the first thing is like that organizational change, seeing what's coming down the line and getting ahead of that and making sure that you're really locked in with the direction of the company and further senior management and how that change is really impacting the sales organization is very, very important. And then I think the second thing is really look at the maturity of the organization, because if you're a founder moving up into like a series A, B, or C, your role is going to be very, very different, and your impact on that business is going to be very, very different. And those younger organizations that don't have the maturity or the investment of a larger SaaS business, there's just a lot more responsibility around enablement and coaching on frontline sales, and a lot more chaos as well. So I think first of all, just recognize the maturity of the organization. In a large organization like a Salesforce, an Okta, or whatever mature SaaS company, you're going to have a lot of enablement. There's going to be a lot of resource that's available for those guys, and so I'd really encourage any leader to really think about the stage of growth that the company is going through at that time, but also their position within it and how they should be coaching to the goals of the company.
Yeah, spot on. And I think this kind of comes back to, so you mentioned like you did some time at Orange. My first inside sales job 15 years ago was a telemarketing business that was booking meetings for Orange and T-Mobile. And then as I was leaving, it became everything everywhere. Then it became EE, then BT acquired EE, and that's when I left. And I remember like cold calling 150 times a day for Orange field reps, and they would turn up at the office in their Jags. And I was like, wow, I'm on like 16 grand a year getting paid £25 a meeting. And these guys were living the dream. But it then took me 8 years until I actually got to BT and became a field rep at BT directly for me to get actual formal training. But it was 2 days, 3 days, Huthwaite spin selling in an office somewhere in the middle of nowhere. And it was good. And like, I've still got the folder down here. Like, anyone listening, if you invest in your people, it's good training. They typically keep it and they use it for the rest of their career. But it is right. Like, what I really would have liked is, rather than spending a lot of time in startups early on, is go and work for, like you said there, a big organization that has lots of enablement. They see the value in this. They know it's all about taking people and building them into elite sellers. And I probably would have accelerated my career a lot faster, earned a lot of money, made a lot less mistakes. So if you are listening to this, what Nick's saying is around looking at the maturity of the business. And if you're a new rep, or you're typically like a enterprise rep, not in terms of the deal sizes, but you typically hang out in enterprise companies, that 7-person startup that's building a new category, which is my first leadership role, it's very, very different to working at BT with 120,000 people. It's a bit of a shock to the system.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of the larger companies, they recruit grads, right? And they recruit grads very, very successfully because they recognize the training and they get it, right? The big investment that happens in the early stages. But it doesn't always teach you about the resiliency of the dynamic smaller environments as well. So it is horses for courses, and it depends on, I think, the mentality that an individual has in the environment they want to be in.
Yeah, and you spoke about rhythms earlier. Let's maybe go back to that. So,
Sure.
I'm a big believer of like creating like operating systems and processes, and being obviously we need to have some flexibility as the business adapts and evolves and things like that. But maybe talk about how weekly rhythms are important for frontline and second line and third line sales leadership to ensure that stuff gets done.
Yeah. So I'll start a little bit flighty first, if you don't mind, James, because I think it's very relevant, because when so much organizational change is taking place, and especially when you're in the weeds, it's very difficult sometimes to kind of step back and think, okay, so what direction are we going in, especially in terms of a second line leadership role. A little bit different maybe for the A's in the front line. But I think, my guiding principles is sort of three that I have. One is that the business comes first, whichever role you're in, right? And the company vision, mission, and values and goals, they should be central to the team's overall focus as a second line manager, and then as a first line manager, and actually in the front line as well. You have to believe in the CEO. You've got to be really clear on what that vision is, what the mission is, because ultimately that's the core value set of what it is that you're driving and delivering. Yes, it's done kind of top of the year at kickoff, but it should really resonate throughout the year as well. And I think, yeah, sorry, did you want to say something?
I was just saying, yeah, absolutely spot on. I think you hit the nail on the head. A lot of people have these great ideas on kickoff, and then you never hear of them again. What you're saying is this should just be baked into everything we do: one-on-ones, group sessions, when we're kicking out emails, like updates. Like, we should be reinforcing this stuff, right? If we want it to become part of the DNA.
So I talked to my leadership team about wearing different hats, and you might be a second line leader that is you've suddenly got a lot more communication that's happening internally. You could be reporting into the SLT or the leadership team, and you may have kind of at some point in time 60% of your time actually communicating internally within the business. So that's why this reference point and this anchor is so important, and it's got to relate to your team as well, and it's got to relate to the first line team as well. So yeah, for me, I think that the team values and the goals orientate to the growth of the business is just fundamental, because you can coach to that. And my team coach to that based upon their personal development goals as well, right? They lead by example. They're aligned with their own growth and aspirations, and it should be really part of their coaching development goals as well.
Yeah, I agree.
So if we get into maybe a little bit more detail, James, around like the regular cadence and what I do around some of the programmatical stuff, I don't know whether, do you want me to lead with that?
I think it'd be great because, again, the nature of my business, I spend a fair bit of time on LinkedIn, and people are always promoting like these like leadership playbooks, and it's all about like, cadences, or like, do you know what I mean? It's like, it's not the building values in, and like how to structure one-on-ones, and how to build OKRs, and how to help reps become more self-aware and have tough conversations. So yeah, I think this may be the basics, but I think it's good because most people don't get the basics. So they mess up on this. So go for it.
All right. I'll tell you a very quick story because I think it's very relevant to this. So as much as I'm preaching like the mission and the values and the goals, I did actually take my leadership team off site. We had a workshop in Manchester, and we literally spent the day. We got the company's vision, the mission, the values. They're all done. Start of the year, did it for my team. We wanted it for the go to market. We literally spent the day working through it for the region. We had our own goals for the region and our own mission for the region, and we wanted to use the company values but extrapolate them into our own. We literally spent all day doing this, and we really got stuck on the values applicable to our region. We did about 4 hours. The next day, we were all at a distributor's for the first time, and we walked in reception, and they had 4 of the 5 values on the back of the wall. And so I do get the fact that a lot of A's may look at this stuff and think it's super fluffy, but actually I think there's a real duty of care as a leadership team to own it as well. But anyway, slight segue. All right, so for me, I look at a sort of regular cadence, building rigor and coaching plans for my leadership team in a couple of very specific ways. So first of all, I'll work back from a quarter and allocate the time appropriately. And a lot of it is focused on protecting coaching time, but there are non-negotiables, right? So if you think about things like forecasting, pipeline reviews, KPI metrics, things like QBRs, management reviews that are taking place, a lot of these are baked in for the quarter. I do it for the quarter and I work back because the time allocation is so important, especially if you think about the rigor of quarterly reporting. And I do it per quarter. I mean, I have a year plan, but I do it per quarter because of the seasonality that we have, and just because it depends on reporting lines as well. You might be into kind of west coast of North America, or into mainland Europe. It kind of depends, but for me, it starts with me, and then my management team will work around how I structure that time so that they can plan their time accordingly as well. So that's really the first thing, right? Set it out per quarter, protect the non-negotiables, and ensure that there's the right time allocated to coaching. Then in terms of leadership rigor, I'll have a weekly productivity metrics session as the cornerstone to performance, okay? And this will be a go-to-market review. And what I'll do is I'll rotate managers or my leadership team to run those sessions, and we'll have that across what we call the horsemen, which will be partner generated, marketing generated, and sales generated activity. And this will be top of funnel reviews, pipeline reviews, week on week tracking, linearity against performance, week on week for the quarter. That then feeds into my managers' one-to-ones, where I'll drive and I'll talk about one-to-ones in a second and how I run them, but I'll drive a cadence with them, which is very much about how I can support them in their coaching needs to deliver against the expectations of those metrics and how they're driving performance for their team. And for me, it's some of it is fundamental, like forecasting accuracy, pipeline cover, pipeline build, win rates, all the standard sort of stuff. But that weekly cadence feeds in quite nicely into the one-to-ones. And then that also relates to skill gaps. And we'll have feedback sessions on their team. Might be role plays, could be deal reviews, listening to gong calls, whatever that might happen. But there'll be a little bit of structure around that, and there'll be signals, and this is the rhythm. There'll be signals from those sessions that really determine the rest of how the rest of the week plays out. So that's how I'll structure it.
Yeah, I love it. And like the protection of time is so important. If we're rolling out a program, with a sales organization, could be medic, could be top of funnel, whatever it is. Like, especially if it's top of funnel, it's amazing how often reps will block over, or managers will block over time for, like, I don't know, power hours, or, medic, like, let's say we're practicing storytelling to capture customer M2 metrics, right? But then all of a sudden, like a waste of time meeting doesn't really need to happen comes in, and they cancel it, they replace it. But you would never cancel a demo or like an economic buyer meeting with a cold calling block, right? So like you have to just get used to, like you said there, like set up shop, time block things for different things that are critical that we know are going to drive the business, leading and lagging, all of that kind of good stuff, and then protect it and like just make sure that we ensure our reps have plenty of time to execute, our managers have plenty of time to look at the data, coach their sellers, work on the run it, driving the business. And then, you at the top, obviously you're looking at that big picture thing, thinking about the strategic goals. Should we go break in over here? Should we go conquer this? Is this in a healthy place? All of that kind of stuff. Right. And I just see people running around like headless chickens, blindfolded, not really looking at any data, not using data, not really having a structure to their week. Their calendar's got loads of white space. Yeah. And then they're like, I feel just really confused what I'm doing. I come to Friday, I'm like, I don't really know what I've done this week, but I feel tired.
So a little bit of advice for those kind of front and second line leaders that are in maybe a more mature organization that have got rev ops or sales ops. One of the very kind of like clear tenets that is the responsibility and duty of care of rev ops and sales ops, or even, it doesn't necessarily have to be those specific functions, but very much, I guess, more operational, that might relate also to finance, where they're looking at how is the business performing to drive growth. One of the things that's really, really underserved is if you look at the day in the life of a rep, what is their selling time and what is their coaching time? Because I've been in situations where, and there is always a clash, right? There's always friction points that happen in the business, but when there's been so much emphasis on, but what is being driven in terms of almost like pipeline or top of funnel, And there's been some massive company events that have taken place. There may be a bit of seasonality as well, where it's just like we just haven't had the capacity in the business because we had so many reps out, or some things that have happened. And so, there are also there's also less of a lens in protecting that selling time and protecting that day in the life of. And I think that's something that's acutely underserved, and something that is really important to have a duty of care from some frontline management to protect that and monitor it as well, right? So when those disruptions take place.
Yeah, 100% agree. Cool. Let's kind of shift gears here. So let's talk about coaching foundation. So I don't know, you've got a layer of frontline AE managers or whatever it is, underneath you. Any kind of guiding principles, best practices that you could share with the listeners that are maybe just stepping up now and they're about to have 3 or 4 AE managers roll up into them?
Yeah. So a couple of things that I've seen which have been, I think, super challenging for those AEs that have moved into frontline management for a very short period of time is that transition to step away from leading the deal. We've all been in situations where on a forecast call is a relatively new manager that's running the forecast call, and they're getting to the weeds of a deal that either they were managing that an AE has taken over, and actually you get to dig into it a little bit more, and then they're literally doing a deal review on a forecast call with the AE that they've just handed their account to.
Yeah.
So I think some of that discipline in really understanding the responsibilities of stepping up into that frontline management role, where it's coaching to success and being very, very explicit around the delineation of responsibilities, where you may be looking at a deal review and wanting to get into the weeds on it, but having the discipline to also step away and just let that AE run, and so that they can also get the fulfillment out of that coaching as well. I think that's something that I've seen. It does take a little bit of time to manage. And then probably the second thing is when you've just got situations where the management might, that first line manager or second line manager, they may step away too far, right? So they just give that responsibility and give that accountability, and then suddenly there's a check-in that happens in kind of like 2 weeks later, a deal's gone cold, or nobody's done the follow-up, and there's just this misunderstanding between the two as to who's taking that ownership and responsibility. And so I think that's why it's very, very important to get into that rhythm. For me, foundational stuff like deal inspection is more about providing positive levels of coaching and support. So one of the things that has really, I think, transformed the way that we coach has got to be, a lot of the AI recordings that take place, where you can really pick out some of those salient points. If you look at the structure of Medic and being able to, really listen to what it is that is being delivered around the messaging and the storytelling, but also the way that the manager is coaching against that, it's transformational. I think all the tools that are there now are just absolutely phenomenal. But that discipline of time allocation to it is very, very important. So we'll pick out a deal, it'll be a weekly rhythm, and it'll be like we'll look at the we'll look at the champion, we'll dig into the champion, and I'll listen to the call, and they'll play back the call, and there'll be the gaps, and then there'll be the recommendations and suggestions to move forward. So for me, I think they're pretty fundamental attributes as well.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. When I quit my job to start this business, I was kind of doing some consulting work, just as I was building up the customer base and like building all of the products and things like that, just to keep some kind of money coming in. And one of the consulting gigs I had, there was a couple of managers, and yeah, very similar to you. One of these managers was fairly new, came onto a forecast call and was just telling me loads of stuff about a deal that wasn't really helpful to the conversation. So afterwards, I pulled them aside for a coaching session. I was like, "Hey, look, how much of that do you think was really needed for the conversation?" And they said, "Look, thinking back, not a whole load." So I gave them a forecast talk track, and I've got a customer now
Nice.
who's just taken over a new team. And the first thing she did, she's like, "Hey, like we're jumping on a forecast calls and not really getting to the requirements here. So I've just given the reps a talk track. So like when they come on a call, they're like, hey, I want to talk to you about Acme. It's in commit. I want to tell you why I'm committing it. So this is the economic buyer and these are the objectives. The economic buyer is like struggling to achieve this year based on X. Our champion is this person. They have access to them. They've got vested interest in our success. This is how we know that. Like we're actually giving them the building blocks to build a forecast rather than the niceties. Like, I've had 3 meetings and they really like our AI capability. Like, don't need to know that on a forecast call. I need you to
Yeah.
call the
Yeah.
number and write
Yeah.
confidently and tell me why you're doing it. But yeah,
So
sometimes you just have to give like new managers, like the
yeah,
coaches, the tools
absolutely.
when they step up, because we just don't get them.
And I don't think they'll always know as well when to bring more sponsorship into a deal. So that's ultimately their role, right? They're stepping away from a deal. You're not asking them to step away from it entirely, but you're essentially giving that responsibility. They're giving that responsibility to their AE. That AE is then going to be asking them for that management advice, and part of that is also around, qualifying to the champion, understanding whether a deal is stuck, how to progress it, and it's their responsibility to then act as that catalyst internally, depending on the size of the deal, right? But if it's a true enterprise deal, you'll need your team aligned internally. There's more responsibility on the manager of that team to bring in the sponsor, provide that level of support and check in that the champion is real, and know when to step away and when to lean into that and when to push back as well. That's something I think takes a little bit of time, but you need to be able to coach to that.
So we've built the leading skill optimization platform with 400 plus sales lessons, 12 courses from prospecting all the way through to late stage deal negotiation and more, one-to-one sales coaching and AI sales assistance. And I want to give you 7 days free access to the platform. The reason I want to do this is because nobody gets a degree in B2B sales. And after training and coaching hundreds of sales reps and teams in the last 2 years, most haven't mastered critical selling skills, and it's preventing them from being promoted, earning great money, and building a great career in B2B sales. So go to the revenueenabler.com, grab a free trial, and join hundreds of salespeople that are closing their skill gaps and mastering sales. There's a link in the video description. I'm looking forward to getting you set up. Give me a shout with any questions. Yeah, 1,000,000%. And like, AI can have such a massive play on it. So for probably 12 months now, I've been building custom GPTs. Some of them are like transactional, like discovery prep or cold call coach, where you drop a transcript in and it kind of uses a scorecard, right? And then there's some that I give to like CROs when we're running a medic program, where they literally just dump their forecast into it. And it kind of gives them a breakdown per rep, per category. And then for the commit bucket, for example, it gives them a talk track for the board. And it means they haven't got to be on like several forecast calls to capture the information. They can just take 50 deals or whatever it is, dump it into AI. As long as it has the context in the back end on what good looks like, it scans those deals really, really quickly and then gives them some action points to go and coach the managers of those AEs. Or if you're a frontline manager, you can use that in a one-on-one and go, hey, Nick, I looked at 3 committed deals for the quarter. Here's my action plan. Love to get your point of view on it before we jump into it. And the manager can be way more effective because they're spending less time going through what I call like the basics. Let AI take care of some of that busy work. If you give it the right context, they can spend more time coaching their sellers, or you can be coaching your frontline managers to go and execute better and ultimately drive a bigger number or drive it faster or whatever. So I think AI is going to have a humongous play in that whole area that just wasn't around when, I was doing it, and you're probably seeing it more recently in your orgs, but very different to when we started out, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the AE more than anything else is really leading that consortium where they're pulling together as that trusted advisor the playbook for, ultimately the purchasing team, and that might be multifaceted. It might be one champion, but it's most likely going to be 2 or 3 different individuals internally that are going to be ultimately doing your selling for you. So yeah, I definitely feel like AI's got a really strong role to play in that. It just means that there's ultimately more competition that's happening as well, because the competitors are rolling out the same sort of capabilities, right?
Yeah, but it will be interesting though, and this is probably a bit of a digress, but I've been saying this for a little while. I think because of AI, so much more competition in these categories is going to come out. I'm not going to say SaaS is dead, but like I'm vibe coding at the moment. I've built this platform in 10 days. With the 15 minutes I have between coaching sessions, I'm like saying, hey, let's do this, let's do that kind of thing. I'm building some stuff that's blowing some people's minds. I've got no software engineering background. I'm a sales guy. It's usually our struggle, right? We've got great ideas, no technical knowledge to build tech.
Yeah.
I think it'd be interesting over the next couple of years to see how SaaS really plays out. And my thinking is that actually, like, professional services, value added capability is going to be a really big differentiator, because if I can vibe code a tool that, there's companies that sell it now for, that are worth hundreds of millions, and I can build that in 23 minutes. Yes, it's not going to have the depth. I don't have the brand, but if I can build the technology, I can upset some people pretty quick. Right.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out over the next couple of years with AI and tools like Lovable.
Did you use Lovable to build that out?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool. So I've
And
been
yeah,
using
yeah.
u.com. I don't know whether you've heard of the search, AI
No.
search called u.com. It's actually somebody who I used to work with. There's a guy called Peter Grant, who's he's great on the GTM podcast. Actually, he's the CRO. They act as essentially an aggregator for all of the foundational AI search platforms. And they have a really good agent stack where they've got like the profile of all different kind of like industry capabilities already. So they've got kind of basically they're building out AI playbooks that are just good to go. Probably not quite as detailed as yours, James, because yours is all very, very prescriptive based upon your input. But you can very quickly get to a point where you can build out a TAM or a SAM, for your go-to-market approach, using this capability with a high level of intellect that's very, very clear on the ICP, very, very clear on the go-to-market, in kind of record time. I mean, we're in annual planning season, right? So if you think about the amount of work that's taking place at the moment, the stuff that I've been able to build out with that has been pretty impressive. A lot of SWOT analysis and competitive landscape stuff as well. So yeah, I agree. It's a really exciting time for AI.
So excited. I was on a call a couple of weeks ago with an SVP, and we were talking about there's never probably been a more exciting time to be in sales than there is now. I remember 2015, 2016 when Vidyard, Salesloft, Outreach kind of started to make their way over the side of the pond, and I was like, oh my god, like I'm going to make so much money. And that was a really exciting moment of my career. And then a couple of years later, it's just been pretty same, and it's so exciting now. Like what's available, like I've got James GPT, which is my AI twin. Like from a coaching perspective, it's got my knowledge base in there. It sounds like me. It's terrifyingly close to my voice, and you can just get coaching 24/7, 365. And again, that's another manager tool that I think is going to be really powerful moving forward. We are going to start to see, with the right capability, managers managing bigger groups because they'll be able to. It'll make more sense if you have the right setup in place.
And also very clearly define skill set gaps, right? Because I think, we're talking about coaching and getting into the rigor and the rhythm. It ultimately comes down to confidence, whichever way you look at it. And that knowledge build and the skill set is about time in the field with your buyers, taking them through that process and getting that repeatable value. I think anything that can really help give that edge that also instills a lot more confidence in your sales org. That is self propelling, right? Just especially in challenging times. You look at SaaS performance metrics per AE over the last 3 years. It has been probably the most challenging period of time of any AE. Having a gig, underperformance has just been absolutely rife for lots of different reasons. And so, for me, confidence is a really big part of coaching to success. And I think that, if you've got the right skill set and the right mindset, the skill and the will, but you can also use some of this tooling. It can really help accelerate the business.
1,000,000%. And like for me, a manager's job is to build an army of elite salespeople, right? And if you look at the top performers in any sales organization, they're not like shaky, terrified people. They're usually super confident because skills or technique builds confidence. If we forget about sales, for example, for a second, I think there's a lot of alignment between sales and like high performing sports. It's like F1 drivers, footballers, right? And usually the best ones are super confident because they've put so much time in the training ground to build the skills. When it's time for Usain Bolt to step up, he always delivers, right? And it's the same in sales. Like if we were really obsessed with closing our sellers' skill gaps, not worrying about changing from Zoom Info to Lusher every 30 seconds, like we would build, Only because we're in these WhatsApp groups, right? And it's just all people talk about.
I
It
know.
just blows my mind.
There's so much of that.
Right?
There's so
It's
much of
like,
that.
oh my God, they're all the same. Just move on. But like if we spent so much time like obsessing over turning our teams into elite sellers, they would all be confident. And guess what?
Yeah.
Buyers want to buy from confident people.
So I went through, I mentioned I went through this exercise with one of my managers and their team around just taking them through the journey of a career in procurement. And I feel like a lot of the coaching, a lot of the skill sets, a lot of the kind of like velocity driven sort of mentality is very volume based, right? For sales. And it's like, what are your metrics? Really understand, right from top of funnel build to conversion and, end to end, whether it's SMB, whether it's mid market, whether it's enterprise, every single rep should really know and understand what their metrics are. But I do feel like there is a little bit of a gap in coaching around saying no, especially for leadership, because I've been through so many transformational businesses over the last sort of decade. Like I said, there's been a ton of M&A. Part of the problem has been kind of really poor transformational data. And a lot of the time that knowledge source comes from leadership. And so when you talk about coaching coaches, I think unless you've got your leadership team or your management team protecting their time accurately as well, you're going to really struggle. And I actually had a session very, very recently with one of my leaders, and I asked them, I said, when did you last say no to me? And they just looked really perplexed, and they were like, well, you're my boss. And I was like, yeah, but I'm not managing your time end to end. That's what I'm calling upon you to do as a duty of care. It's like protecting the AE's time and protecting the coaching time. It's very much the same for your leadership, right? And so I'd really encourage anyone to kind of stand back and kind of like, just do that exercise of saying no. It's something that's really underserved, if you ask me. Yeah.
1,000,000%. We were talking on the podcast about this. Like, if push comes to shove, and it's time for you to potentially lose your job, people don't. I get the importance, especially in a startup, about wanting to be helpful and trying to like support other people. But people typically don't remember that stuff when you miss your quota 3/4 on the bounce. They just remember you've missed your quota 3/4 on the bounce, and then that's it. You're on a pip or you're out. So you do have to get good at saying no. And when I was a VP, I was in early stages orgs, so there was loads of like scrappy. We've got all these great ideas. CEO, like my first VP gig, my CEO is fantastic, still good, friends with him now, but we always had like lots of different ideas once we closed a round or whatever, and your head would hurt at the end of the week.
Yeah.
And after a while I got good at saying, hey, look, I'm happy to help there, but where in my compensation plan or my objectives does this feed into? I mean, we were selling performance management software, right? So OKRs and one-on-ones. I was like, hey, let's just jump into the tool,
Brilliant.
right? And he was like, fair enough, right? And we just got really good, that kind of partnership. And I got really good at saying, hey, look, I'm going to have to say no. I just don't have the capacity. And a lot of times, like, yeah, to be fair, like that can probably wait. But you're so right. People are not afraid, but they're like, I shouldn't say no to my boss. I'm kind of expecting you to challenge me. Right, I'm expecting you to say, hey, I'm working on this big thing that you gave me, like I need some capacity, it's not going to plan, here's the challenges, can I come back to this? I'm like, yeah, sure, like that's your objective, I need you to hit that, I need you to do this thing. So yeah, don't be afraid to say no. It's all about managing up.
And to be really honest with you, I felt bad, right? Because it's like, that's not the way that I lead. I feel like I'm a service leader. And so if my team can't say no to me, there's something wrong. And so I could tell that they were just going through a bit of a burnout stage. And there were lots of other pressures from different parts of the business as well. So that was why I felt that challenge needed to take place. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Conscious of your time, but I've got a couple of questions. So one is around like frequency. So some people are like, hey, you should do weekly, call coaching, bi-weekly deal review coaching sessions. You should do one-on-ones. I do polls every now and then on LinkedIn. It's terrifying. Like 80% of people say I get coaching once a quarter at a QBR or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Terrifying. But like from you, best practice, like what's the frequency? What does that look like across those like pipeline generation, pipeline advancement, kind of skill development areas?
So I think there are a couple of very important considerations. It really depends on the segment. It really depends on I think the business that you're in and the velocity that you're looking to drive, and probably the level of sophistication in terms of what it is that you're selling, right? Because if it's something that's kind of six figures, maybe even seven figures, and requires a lot more consideration with a really mature AE, you like to think that they've got the scars and that they've got, a high level of credibility, and there's probably less coaching that would need to be done around velocity, but they may need a little bit more executive coaching in terms of looking at maybe the landscape of maybe some of those larger deals that they're looking at. So for me, it feels like certainly lower down SMB, there should absolutely be weekly coaching. I mean, if it starts with SDRs and BDRs, I'm a big fan of, daily stand-ups, for example, and just setting the expectation for the day, just driving that velocity. For SMB, I would recommend that it's a minimum twice a week. Again, depends on the business and the size and the size of the sort of average deal, and just that velocity that needs to be driven. And then as you move up to mid-market, probably once a week, and then enterprise, maybe bi-weekly, depending on the tenure and the experience of the AE. So I mean, it really does depend, but yeah, I think the most important thing is that it's assessed and analyzed. And if it's not, and there isn't a rhythm around it, you need to instill that straight away.
Yeah, 100%. I had a great leader on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying, like, when he onboards a new rep, he makes a commitment to them. It's absolutely okay for you to cancel a one-on-one on me if you've got a really important deal you need to close. But I just want to let you know, I will never cancel one of our one-to-ones. I make that commitment to you. And I think that's just world class, because again, like most of my career, my managers would always cancel our one-on-ones, never put them back on the calendar. And they would usually cancel them for those really, really amazing executive meetings that you look through the glass, you think, wow, I wonder what they're speaking about when you're an AE. And when you get in there, they're usually just a massive waste of time. So I think if you're listening to this as a leader, like, make a commitment to your people, unless it's like, you're going to make the number or you're not. Don't start canceling one-on-ones, because you send a signal to your people that session's not that important.
Yeah. James, I don't think one-to-ones are coaching sessions, just to be clear with you. So the way I structure my one-to-ones, we were going to cover this, so let me just do it very quickly now. I do a weekly one-to-one, looking back, looking forwards. There'd always be an agenda. I never really attend any meetings at all without an agenda. My team know that, so there's always a little bit of prep that's involved. And we'd run through some very fundamental things like, what is sort of top of mind for the one-to-one, but we'd also cover skill gaps. There'd be input on the doc that would be that's looking back and looking forward, but we'd also use the data. When we were talking about those weekly stand-ups, we'd also use the data to coach against needs. And there'd be a coaching plan for my leadership team as well. And we would carve out separate time for that coaching. So the one-to-one would be that rhythm that would just take place, which is probably a little bit more operational, but very, very much about servicing the need of the leader or the person in my team, but using the data to be able to carve out time to have those separate coaching sessions as well. I heard a stat last week, James. Apparently $1 million is lost for a mishire on average. So I think if you think about the mentality of hiring slow, be methodical about it, ensuring that you really hire to culture, capability, and performance, and all that sort of stuff, but fire fast. That is absolutely the right way to go, because you think about that material cost of the business, $1 million to go through that whole cycle. That's going to have a very negative impact on the business, right? Regardless of the size. I mean, if you're small, it could be like, catastrophic, but no business wants to lose that level of money or impact on the culture, right?
I think that's probably a whole other episode, but like, if you just stepped up a frontline manager, like, again, nobody taught me how to recruit. So the first couple of people weren't great. It's a reflection on my leadership, right? I made all of the excuses in the world at the time because I was embarrassed and etc. But I very quickly realized that if something doesn't work out, it's either my poor recruitment skills, or I lacked capability to coach, develop, inspire, motivate that person to be great if I would hire them again. So you're absolutely spot on. I agree with you, by the way. For me, actually, there's like three kind of core buckets. You have that one-on-one, which is in isolation, and then you have a call review and a deal review. And I kind of separate those out. And in my last role, for example, I inherited a team that had big gaps. So we would have, for the first couple of months during the week, there would be the AEs would have role play sessions in the morning with the SDRs on top of funnel. I'm a big believer if we don't warm up, we're probably going to practice on our prospects. That's an expensive mistake when you're selling enterprise. And then in the afternoon on a Tuesday and a Wednesday, or a Tuesday and a Thursday, the AEs had role play with me on like discovery or demo or business case, whatever it was that we needed to solve for. And then on top of that, I would do a call review with them individually during that week and a deal review with them during that week. And they would have access to the same data that I was looking at. And I would expect them to come with a point of view, being self-aware, and say, hey, this is what I think we should speak about today. I looked at the dashboard for 15 minutes before we hopped on. This is what I'm seeing. It took me a bit of time to build that into them. But like before I quit my job to come and start this business, I felt really good about being able to leave those guys, because my point of view on leadership is around retirement. If I can get to a point where I can retire myself, they don't need me anymore, I can go off and do something else, like break into Germany, or go and launch another market or segment or whatever. I just decided to quit my job and start building my own business. But like, it's all about building your reps to become more self-aware, look at the data. And that's where I just found isolating those sessions just kept like stay in our lane, deep focus on what mattered in that moment, not getting to a one-on-one that becomes three things. Your one-to-one, my call review, and then the deal review. You just don't have a great conversation in that period of time. So I don't know if you agree with me, but I think they should be isolated and have just focused sessions.
Yeah, 100%. In fact, you just reminded me, because when you get into that rhythm, every VP should be able to role play and do a deal review and coach an AE, by the way. I very strongly believe that. Maybe not to the ability of the manager, but they should still be able to do that, right? So I was on I did a role play with somebody who was relatively technical but new within the business, who came up with this new use case that absolutely blew me away. And it kind of changed our positioning and our narrative and the way that we sell. And this is a guy that came from a little bit more of a technical background, but he managed to identify that there was some nefarious code that was being uploaded to GitHub as part of this sort of like compromised credentials, kind of state-backed, really sort of nefarious activity, and it created a lot of breaches in the market that were quite well known, but not necessarily known to us. So it became this almost like really strong sort of cybersecurity playbook for us that, was really, really effective. But I wouldn't have known this. I was doing a role play, right? So yeah, I think it works both ways. You're there to kind of coach and support, which is the majority of the time, but you're also learning.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I got one last question, and like, it'd be interesting to get your point of view on this, and maybe this is a part 2 episode, but a lot of what we've said today, and fun enough, I was on a session this morning with another leader, and a lot of it comes back to like being a really great recruiter. Life gets a lot easier when you're good at spotting good people. You're looking at the right characteristics and behaviors and skills and things like that. Are there any, like, I don't know, top 2 or 3 characteristics that come to mind for a first line versus a second line leader?
So for me, I think that first line leadership role, you've really got to be hiring somebody that is able to do that player coach. I think that's so fundamental. You may have a bit of change that's going on in the team. They may need to step back into being an AE, but they've also got to have that ability to be able to step in and be able to support the AE in the front line. So I think a player coach role as that front line is very, very important. Also to kind of like just ensure that the checks and balances across the team are really, really tight. Somebody who's in the trenches, and somebody that, for me, I like to hire for velocity. I think that's very, very important. So those are really strong attributes for me. And I would also make sure that you're hiring for the ambition of the company. And that might sound like a little bit of a cliche, but so often that's underserved, where you may have, a first line leader that is thinking, it's going to be like 6 months and I'm on to the next role, and I'm going to be progressing very quickly. It's like, actually, the company it may be a kind of a complex capability or product that you're selling. And it's like, you're not even going to be ramped properly until like a year. Right. And so that expectation, that works both ways. You might have a frontline manager that just can't keep up. So for me, they're really, really sort of fundamental attributes. And then for second line management, I talked a little bit about hats earlier in the conversation. I think that it's very, very important that somebody's got the scars. So for me, if I'm bringing in a second line manager, somebody that's gone through quite a big transformation, organizational change, I think is pretty fundamental. And the reason that that's important is because you're servicing the internal SLT typically, as well as the external, the external growth of in that role. There's a lot of sort of internal relationships that also need to be built in that second line role. And I would also really dig into that as part of the interviewing process to be able to ensure that second line manager is able to say no, a bit like we were talking about earlier, right? Push and pull of the business, when to qualify internally and know whether they're spending their time appropriately against the needs of the business. So yeah, those are probably the things I'd reference.
That makes sense. And I guess you're part of your kind of overall top leadership playbook is around coaching the coaches on how to do this stuff, right? How to actually assess talent. Because a lot of time we like, I come off an interview, I got a really good feeling about that person. That's cool, but where's the evidence? What's the data telling us? How are we scoring them against what good looks like for us? Otherwise, we can make mistakes that way, right?
Yeah, so I think that building a lot of that intelligence to ask the right questions. So so you're not just kind of like shooting from the hip. There's a bit of structure behind that is very, very important. To be able to scale appropriately across a leadership team, you really need to be very, very clear about what the goals are, what the responsibilities are, what the discipline is. And that really starts with the qualification of recruitment and bringing the right people into the team. There was another great podcast I listened to last week, so I'm not doing a disservice to yours, James, because it's awesome. But Chris Degnan, I think his name is, he grew Snowflake from 0 to, I think it was 4 billion. He was there like seed stage. It was just phenomenal to see that velocity and growth. But he talked a lot about what you were saying around, developing a leadership team where your role is essentially just not needed anymore as you grow, as those layers build up. Just ensuring that you're coaching your leadership team to ultimately take over your role. It's a really important foundation, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes when I say this whole retirement thing, people are like, I don't want to lose my job. I'm like, you're not losing your job. You're building like the family, right? It's like I've got a kid now. Like I'm trying to develop him into a really great human being. So when he becomes 18, he can go off maybe a little bit earlier. He can go off into society and be a good member of society, and then I can move on to something else, maybe a lot of golf and go out and watch a bit more Formula One. But like, it's the same in business. Like if I can take these 5 or 8 AEs and turn them into elite machines, then they'll still need some support. Like we should never stop developing people, but I can then kind of bring in somebody and I can go and take over, breaking into enterprise and going up market, or trying to figure out how the hell we do this again, but in the US where it's a completely different beast, or into the DAC region, right? So I think that mindset of like, how do I retire myself? It's exactly the same. Again, we kind of digress a bit, but I was on an podcast interview the other day with an AE manager, and I said, we're talking about ramping AEs. I said, what about if we had this mindset where we need to get an AE on a cold call in the afternoon of their first day? Can you imagine what we'd strip out if we had to do that? Like that may never be a reality, but imagine how much more effective and the quality of our onboarding plan would look like if we cut out the tour of the office where the fire escapes are, and instead we said, hey, these are our personas. This is their current state. Here's their desired future state. This is how we get them there, and this is how we measure success. Here's a framework. Here's a good list of accounts. Go mess up on them.
I mean, on the BDR side, we do that as the interview stage, right? So, but the A's should be able to do that, in my opinion. Yeah, but you're right. They're not going to do it anything like as well as what they should on day one. Good thing to ask for.
Yeah, love this chat. Definitely would love to get you back and go a bit deeper into a couple of these areas. If there was anything that comes to mind, like if you were to go back in time, or if there's a manager now that's stepping up to becoming a VP and they've got a couple of AEs managers underneath them, is there like one thing that you might leave them with today, which is like, go do this right now, or take this really seriously? Does anything come to mind?
The one thing that I think the mindset, the mentality, the attitude of career ambition is, there's a lot of people that I feel talk a lot about that, but don't necessarily live and breathe the actions. And I remember, like in my recruitment days, I don't really know where it came from or why, but I obsessively read the FT on a bus that took me from Camden or Primrose Hill to Regent's Park every day. And I probably understood about 5% of what I was reading. But the one thing that it built in me is like, I kind of knew what was happening in the telco market. I kind of knew what was happening in M&A. I kind of knew what was happening with capital markets. I kind of knew what was happening with the economies, the macroeconomic signals and that sort of stuff. And I think we talk a lot about being very, very prescriptive in terms of like high performance selling. But I think if you're going to move up into a senior leadership role, like a VP role, you really have to start to broaden your curiosity and think almost like a business owner. So that would be the thing for me, use that natural curiosity and instinct to really research the direction that you're going in, because it doesn't matter whether you're in a certain sort of like, I don't know, industry or tech or, category. There's a lot of focus around categorization, right? And being a category leader. You're going to need those skill sets. So for me, that would be the one thing I would say, be curious about the business that you want to operate in. And if you want to elevate yourself into a more senior role, get some mentors. I'm doing a little bit of mentorship before the end of the year. People want to jump on a call with me. Then go out, be curious and read.
Yeah, 100%. If you've made it this far in the podcast, I would absolutely take Nick up on that. You can probably tell this just comes straight to top of mind. He's not reading a blog and making this stuff up. He's been he's been in the trenches. He's got the scars. Definitely, if there's an opportunity to have a conversation with Nick, I would highly recommend it. Where's the best place to reach out to you, Nick? On LinkedIn?
Just LinkedIn. Yeah. Just drop me a DM. Yeah.
Awesome. All right.
What I will say, James.
Yes.
Because I've got it here.
Thank you.
Like when I was talking about the world in Orange, where it was very complex around value selling, this really is just such a great dissemination, I think, of all of the fluff and all of the noise that you have around value selling. That focus on the champion. I think you've done a really good job in the book. So yeah, big shout out to you.
I just, like you, I've got a lot of scars from thinking I had a champion when I really didn't, and I forecasted a deal and it never happened. So when I managed to figure it out, I've got to tell the world, right? So yeah, I'm glad it was a good read. Appreciate you sharing that on the podcast. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Awesome. All right, well, we'll definitely get you back. But yeah, thank you so much for hanging out with us for the full 60 minutes. And yeah, we'll see you soon.
Thanks, James. Cheers.
Awesome. See you later. All right, thanks for listening to this episode. I've got something else I want to give you before we wrap up here. So we've built the leading skill optimization platform with 400 plus sales lessons, 12 courses from prospecting all the way through to late stage deal negotiation and more, one-to-one sales coaching and AI sales assistance. And I want to give you 7 days free access to the platform. The reason I want to do this is because nobody gets a degree in B2B sales. And after training and coaching hundreds of sales reps and teams in the last 2 years, most haven't mastered critical selling skills. And it's preventing them from being promoted, earning great money, and building a great career in B2B sales. So go to therevenueenabler.com, grab a free trial, and join hundreds of salespeople that are closing their skill gaps and mastering sales. There's a link in the video description. I'm looking forward to getting you set up. Give me a shout with any questions.